Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Sean, and today we are talking about Origin Story, and our copy was provided for review, but the thoughts in this video are all our own.
Origin Story is a 1 to 5 player game designed by Jamey Stegmaier and Pete Wissinger, and with art by Clémentine Campardou. And this is a trick-taking game where you're building your tableau to strengthen your superhero throughout the game. Let's take a look at how it plays.
You start the game with a player mat, an alignment/victory point dial, 2 random superhero cards, and a stamina token. Then at the start of each round, you're dealt 8 playing cards, as well as 3 story cards, which you choose one of and add to your player board, along with another stamina. Then you use your stamina to charge your various abilities. Finally, players simultaneously decide their allegiance, either choosing hero, which gains them 1 point per trick won in the round, or villain, which gains 4 points if you don't win any tricks at all. The rounds are played in a series of tricks, meaning the lead player plays a card, then every other player must follow with a card of the same suit if possible. The highest card of the lead suit wins, unless someone who can't follow the suit plays a heart card, which beats any other suit. Then whoever won the hand leads the next trick. Throwing some kryptonite wrenches into all of this are those story cards, which can influence the game in a bunch of ways, including changing card values, scoring points, drawing cards, gaining stamina, and a whole bunch of other things. At the end of each round, players gain points depending on their allegiance, and then another 8 cards are dealt for the next round, along with more story cards and more stamina. In the third round, you also add a random event card, which impacts everybody in unexpected ways. And then in the 5th round, you reveal your superhero, which usually gains a bunch of points and a final powerful twist. After 5 rounds are done, you compare dials, and the greatest superhero is named.
The biggest thing that sets this game apart from other trick takers is probably the superhero theme. And how you build your superhero is by adding story cards for the first 4 rounds, and that changes the game quite a bit.
Yeah, they're really powerful. So nearish the start of each one of those rounds, you're going to get 3 story cards and you pick one of them. And I've never had a situation where there wasn't at least one that I really want, and usually I'm picking between 2 that really kind of fit what I'm doing, but basically all of them are game breaking.
Yeah, they are all incredibly useful and very variable as well, because some of them will let you be able to discard and trade cards. Some of them might give you VP in certain situations. Some of them might tie to specific suits, and it can be tough to choose because you do get that story card choice after you're dealt your hand. So often I find myself choosing based on my current hand, but that's only for 1 round. So sometimes it's better to also think about the future.
Yeah, I've definitely done that where I'm like, oh, what a great fit right now. And then I don't need it again. But it is good for that one hand. The other thing I like about this system too is that you're getting one of those around because they are quite strong, and there is usually something to remember about them. Some of them just happen right away when you put them down. You don't have to think about them again. But often there's something that's kind of ongoing throughout, where it's like I'm trading a card when this thing happens, or I'm gaining points if this thing happens, or whatever that might be. So I like that you're getting one of those around, so you get kind of a chance to get comfortable with this one, and then you move on, and then you move on, and then by the end you've got 4 of these really strong powers, plus whatever your main mat power is, although we don't use those that much. But you're kind of able to hold all that stuff in your brain.
Yeah, it definitely makes it easier that it's a slow build, so by the end you are familiar with everything for sure. And the stronger cards are going to cost you more stamina, and you don't have a huge supply of stamina. So what is interesting too is if you're choosing to use a strong card, then you're going to have less stamina to put on other cards, but it could be worthwhile.
Yeah, and I often go for those strong cards because also there's things that might give you more stamina later. So I think, you know what, I'll just figure that out in the future. One slight tricky with this part of the game I find is that I can remember what I've got, but I really have trouble understanding what anyone else has. And we even do at the start of each round saying like, everyone read out your cards, and so everyone does that, and I have no idea. I have no idea by the time we get around the table. I don't remember. So people are playing these powers. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot you could do that. Well, I kind of screwed up there. So that is a little bit tricky, especially by that like fourth round, when if you're playing a 4-player game, you've got 16 game-breaking powers that are all going on.
Yeah, I do like it, I think, in fact, because there's just no way that you can keep track of absolutely everything. And even if you could, or even if I could, I don't know if that would cause me to play any differently either. Because if I knew that their like green colored suit did something special, I'm nowhere near like counting cards to realize if they might have green colored suits left in their deck. So most of the time, I don't think it would drastically impact what I'm choosing.
But I do like that basically all the cards feel broken. And that's nice that we've played it with people and they're like, oh, that seems way too strong. And then you're like, yours seems way too strong, because they do all feel way too strong. And I think that's what you needed in this system. And so I do think that that works well. So the other two of the kind of interesting kinds of cards are the event cards and the superhero cards. And the event cards only come out once a game. So only in round 3 do you play one of these event cards, and that is going to impact everyone at the table.
And they are quite variable. They might have differences with like the cards that you're getting, or the suits that you're playing, or the like extra VP that might get assigned.
Yeah, some of them are small, where you're passing cards or whatever it is, but some of them do feel kind of like comic book events. Like there's one that I think is really cool, where there's one suit and everyone takes all the cards out of their hand of that suit, and then once your hand is empty, you pick up all those cards again. And it's pretty obviously meant to be like that Avengers Endgame, because I think it's called the Blink event or something. And so all of them have been like blinked out of existence, and then they come back into your hand. And this is an important thing to note, that there aren't that many kind of one-to-one superhero connections. This really does its own thing. But that one did stand out to me, and there's a couple other little ones, but I do like the events where it feels like something's going on.
Yeah, it is, I think, more interesting when that round feels very different. But I do like that you just don't know, because there are so many different events for a card that's only used once per game. And there are also the superhero cards, because you get dealt 2 at the beginning of the game, and in round 5, you pick which one you want to use, and those are very strong.
They mostly are, and this is probably the most contentious part of the game for us, I think, because there are 12 of those, 10 of those. I think there's 10. I think there's enough for 2 per player, and 6 of those feel very balanced. 1 of those feels very strong. 1 of those feels a little bit situational, and 2 of them feel super weak, especially at 2 or 3 players. And so usually, because you get 2, you're going to end up with 1 that is pretty decent. And you're probably going to end up getting somewhere between 8 and 12 points, plus some sort of something else that gets you other cards, or gets you more stamina, or gets you something or other. But it does feel like there's a little bit more variance in those that I might like, but still, you can play to some of those at the end as well.
And those ones that you can build towards are nice, because there's one that if all of your story cards are different, you get points. So that will just influence which ones you choose. Another one where you get more points if your story cards are higher value. And so you have a lot of control for those ones.
Yeah, and I do like them, and I do like that they make such a it's such a big thing, such a big reveal late in the game, but it can feel a little bit swingy. But I'm a little torn on it, because I do also like that there's this thing that is a lot at the end of the round. So I think people's kind of feelings about that are going to differ depending on who you are.
From what I understand, the origin of Origin Story is the art that Jamey saw this lovely like watercolored art and thought it would be great to make a game based on this art using superheroes.
And it is cool that most of the superheroes do look totally new and original, which is hard when there's billions of superheroes. And I do think I'm nerdier than most, and I've got a pretty good handle of what superheroes are out there. And even still, there was just a few where I'm like, that reminds me a bit of Multiple Man, or like there was a couple in there that I thought, oh, this one feels a bit like Riptide from the Marauders. These are all very deep cuts. And so when that's kind of the point of reference that you're like, oh, is this a little bit from that? You know that they are really trying to make something original.
Yeah, it definitely feels new and like its own thing. I think there might be a little bit of differences for who likes the art too, because I think watercolors in general, some people really like watercolors, some people not so much. But I also, like you, I do like the art, and I like how it's been implemented throughout, like especially with those player boards, because there are really lovely player boards that has like a full image of the character, and then you open it up and then you've got a spot for all of your cards.
Yeah, I really like, we got one right here. I really like these player boards because it, looks like a little comic. You open it up, it's got the things. I think that's great. It really does a good job of both showing you when you're going to be doing certain things, guiding you through the game, and bringing you into kind of the theme of the game.
And I really like the dials where you keep track of your points, because at the beginning of each round, every player chooses whether they want to be a superhero or a villain, and it's just double-sided with your points transferring. So it's just a really nice system.
Yeah, and I think that's clever that it shows, as you flip it, that it stays just how it was on the other side. It actually took me a little bit to get my brain around when I was making it, and thankfully they've got really good instructions of how to put these together too. But yeah, I think these work really well. The pink little speech bubble tokens that are your stamina, I think those are really nice. All the components in here, I think, do a really good job.
This game feels quite a bit different at different player counts, especially at 2 players. At 2 players, you each have your hands, but you also have a sidekick. And so the sidekick has 8 cards, but only 2 are revealed at a time. And then you are responsible for playing the card of your sidekick. But they can win tricks. If they win a trick though, you lead. So it doesn't feel like a 4-player game. It feels like a 2-player game, but you need those extra players involved.
Yeah, it's interesting because also if they win a trick, you don't get points for that trick. Yeah. No one gets points for that trick. You just take over leading because they won. But there is kind of a neat thing with that because you see those 4 cards, 2 cards each, it gives you a little bit of planning of what cards you're going to play. But your opponent can sometimes make surprising choices that maybe they want to lose that round for some reason or other, or whatever it might be. And so it does add a little bit of strategy, but yeah, it feels very different. And I would say, I'll just say this right out of the way, that this is, I think, a better game at more players. I think at 4 and 5 players, it feels like that's kind of the sweet spot for this game, but I am impressed that they made a 2-player trick-taking game that does work. I still think this works at 2. I just think it's probably better at more.
Yeah, it definitely does work at 2. At more players, I do find the whole whether to be a superhero or a villain more interesting, because we found at 2 players, we had a really tough time seeing the value of being a villain, because you want to stop your opponent from winning and you don't have a lot of control over the cards of your sidekick. So it felt like I would always be a superhero, whereas at 4 players, that becomes a lot more interesting because getting 4 points in a 4-player game seems more valuable.
Yeah, it does. And at 4 players and at 5 players, I like the chaos of how many superhero cards or how many of the story cards are all in play and all the weird stuff that's going on. I think that's where this game really gets fun, is when you've got 4 people and everyone's got 4 story cards and it's just, bananas.
And there is also a solo mode, which I think you were actually surprised by.
Yeah, I was surprised because, again, I thought, well, how are you going to do a trick-taking game as a solo mode? That's what I thought for 2 players. It works at 2. And the solo mode really pleasantly surprised me. So in the solo mode, you're playing against two different hands, but you've got them all lined up. So you've got the cards, you got 8 cards lined up for 2 bot players, and then you've got your 8 cards lined up as well. So you can see all the cards they probably have. But I say probably because each time you play a card, or anyone plays a card, then the next bot whose turn it is to play draws 2 cards, and they might keep those cards depending on the other cards that they have. So they may switch things. So even if it looks like you're definitely going to lose, you may end up winning because they, through this mechanic, lose those strong cards. And they've just got a bunch of things on these little event cards that help strengthen them and help throw some wrenches into the whole thing. But in that mode, I definitely thought, like, this doesn't really work. I'm destroying them in the first 2 rounds. Oh boy, did they ever come back as you get later on. And you can strengthen them up as well so that kind of burst happens earlier, because there's 2 different levels of cards, these green ones that aren't very strong that you're going to play each round, and these red ones that are very strong that you're going to play each round. That makes a difference too. So I just beat them the one game I played, but I could definitely see losing to them as well. And that is more of a puzzle game than it is like a regular trick taker, but I think it's an interesting puzzle.
So the most interesting part of this game for me, and really the core part of the game, is that tableau that you're making, because every game feels so different, not only in terms of like how your cards are impacted, but what everybody else is also throwing into the mix. But kind of a flip side of that is I do feel like it works better at a higher player count.
Yeah, I agree with that, but the plus, I think, as well, to like how different the different games are, is it feels a little bit like you're getting 3 games in this box, kind of, sort of, because that solo mode is really a game unto itself. That 2-player mode is like a clever little 2-player trick-taking-ish game. And then that 3 to 5-player mode is kind of the game as I think people expect the game to play. And I don't mind that. I don't mind that you're getting 3 different games, and maybe you like one of those a lot more than the other. I think most people are going to prefer this at the higher player count, but I enjoyed playing it at the other 2-player counts as well.
Yeah, no, I do agree. I also really like the artwork. I think it has nice, unique artwork. And I do like just how many different cards there are for how different everything can feel. I like the one event that happens, because you never know in round 3 how that's going to play. I do think for that final card, it's really interesting that it's this big, strong, like superhero power that you get. But I do think there's maybe a couple of them I might just not include when we give out cards. I agree with everything that you have to say there. I think if you like trick-taking games, this is a solid one that does something, a little bit different. There are some things in here that certainly remind me of other trick-taking games, but I think this is a pretty interesting trick-taking game. We've played it with a few people. I've enjoyed it every time I played it, partly because I've won every game of this so far, so I really like that. But I think it does a decent job. And that is it. Have you played Origin Story? What did you think? And what other recent trick-taking games are you excited about? Thank you so much for watching. As usual, please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.